Our history books have missed entire chapters of the human story beneath the dense, green canopies of jungles long thought to be untouched wilderness. Revolutionary discoveries are now revealing the bones of vast, forgotten cities. These finds are forcing a complete rewrite of the ancient world's population, challenging every assumption about where and how millions of people once lived. By the end of this exploration, you will see a new map of our past emerge, one where lost metropolises reshape our understanding of civilization itself. We will journey from the laser-scanned suburbs of Angkor to the hidden garden cities of the Amazon, uncovering how a simple technological breakthrough is shattering centuries of belief. How much of our own story is still waiting, hidden just out of sight, for us to finally see it? For centuries, the jungle guarded its secrets with near-perfect efficiency. An explorer could spend a lifetime within its green walls and uncover only fragments, a single overgrown pyramid or a weathered stone platform, with no way to grasp the true scale of what lay around them. The fundamental problem was one of perspective. You cannot map a city when you are standing inside it, especially when that city is buried under a living roof of trees. The breakthrough did not come from a new theory, but from a new way of seeing, borrowed from the skies. It is called light detection and ranging, or Lidar. Imagine, if you will, the difference between searching for a needle in a haystack with your hands and having the ability to make the haystack disappear with a thought. That is the transformative power this technology has brought to archaeology. The principle is elegant in its simplicity. A specialized scanner mounted on a plane or drone fires hundreds of thousands of laser pulses toward the ground every single second. Each pulse is a tiny photon of light racing downward. Most hit the leaves and branches of the canopy, but a precious few slip through gaps in the foliage, strike the solid ground below, and bounce back to the sensor. By meticulously measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, a computer can calculate a precise distance. Repeat this process millions upon millions of times during a single flight, and you assemble a staggeringly detailed three-dimensional map of the Earth's surface, a digital terrain model where the trees have been computationally erased. What remains is the ghostly imprint of human engineering, the ancient ground itself, revealing everything built upon it. This is not merely a tool for finding isolated structures. It is a device for restoring context on a colossal scale. Where a ground team might document a solitary temple, Lidar reveals that temple to be the centerpiece of a sprawling suburban neighborhood, connected by raised causeways to administrative complexes, reservoirs, and farmlands. It shows not just a city, but its arteries and its skeleton. In Southeast Asia, researchers like Dr. Damian Evans have used Lidar over the greater Angkor region to reveal a vast, low-density urban expanse that integrated temples, villages, and intricate water management grids across an area larger than modern-day Los Angeles. They did not just find more buildings, they discovered an entire metropolitan philosophy, a way of organizing a society in harmony with and in control of a monsoon climate. This is why experts call it a paradigm shift. It changes the very unit of archaeological inquiry from the site to the landscape. The implications are profound. Every hidden road, every canal, every terraced field mapped by Lidar is direct evidence of labor, of planning, of a population large enough and organized enough to reshape its environment. These were not small groups clinging to survival in a hostile wilderness. They were complex, interconnected societies capable of large-scale landscape modification. The jungle we once saw as a barrier, an empty space between civilizations, is now being understood as the very fabric of those civilizations. It was their home, their resource, and their canvas. And with this digital eye now scanning the world's forests, a pressing question emerges. If one flight over a known archaeological zone can reveal a metropolis 10 times larger than expected, what awaits discovery in the places we have never even thought to look? The answer is rewriting history, one laser pulse at a time. The iconic spires of Angkor Wat have long symbolized a mysterious kingdom lost to the jungle. For generations, historians saw this place as a magnificent but isolated ceremonial capital, a collection of stone monuments separated by vast tracts of wilderness. The truth, revealed by those penetrating laser pulses, is astonishingly different. The temples were not isolated at all. They were the glittering civic and religious core of an immense, continuous urban landscape. Lidar maps have peeled back the forest to expose a sprawling, low-density metropolis covering an area comparable to modern-day London, a network of life extending for nearly 1,000 square miles. This was not a city in the dense, walled sense of ancient Rome or Constantinople. It was a carefully engineered garden city of suburbs, where neighborhoods of wooden homes on raised mounds were intricately connected by a web of canals, roads, and reservoirs. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Angkor transforms instantly from a grand archaeological site into the largest pre-industrial city on Earth. This single discovery forces a dramatic upward revision of the Khmer Empire's population. Where earlier estimates spoke of tens of thousands, we must now consider a society of several 100,000, perhaps even approaching 1 million souls at its peak. All those people required water, food, and organization. The LiDAR data shows exactly how they achieved it. The entire landscape was a sophisticated machine for managing the monsoon. Canals redistributed water from massive reservoirs like the West Barre, which is longer than 5 kilometers, to fields and households. Raised roads kept travel and trade flowing year-round. This was a civilization that did not just build in its environment, it sculpted the environment itself into a life support system. The implications are profound. Such a vast, interconnected system speaks of a level of social coordination and administrative control far beyond what was previously credited to the Khmer Empire. It was a hydraulic society, its prosperity and its power literally flowing through these man-made waterways. This revelation also casts its eventual decline in a new, sobering light. The very complexity that sustained such a massive population may have contained the seeds of its vulnerability. Some researchers now suggest that centuries of maintaining this elaborate water network, combined with shifts in climate, could have led to its failure. The metropolis, so dependent on its engineered landscape, may have become a victim of it. The grandeur of the stone temples was merely the tip of an iceberg, a monumental peak rising from a hidden mountain of everyday life, commerce, and immense human effort. It forces a humbling question. If we so dramatically underestimated the scale of a world-famous site like Angkor, a place we thought we knew, what other empires have we shrunk in our historical imagination? While Angkor's discovery redefined a single empire's scale, a similar revelation was simultaneously unfolding an ocean away, shattering the foundational map of an entire hemisphere. The ancient Maya of Central America have long been portrayed as a constellation of brilliant but isolated city-states, like Tikal or Calakmul, separated by vast, untamed rainforest. This image, carefully constructed from decades of ground exploration, was compelling but incomplete. It was a map of stars without the lines that connect them into constellations. Then came the LiDAR flights over the dense jungles of northern Guatemala's Patane region. The digital peel back of the canopy did not just reveal a few more temples. It unveiled an astonishing, uninterrupted fabric of civilization. Where maps once showed empty green space between known sites, the lasers painted a landscape humming with human activity. The survey detected more than 60,000 previously unknown structures, This was not merely a collection of cities, it was a continuous, integrated megalopolis. Think of it not as finding new islands in an empty sea, but discovering that the sea itself was an illusion, and all those islands were actually the mountain peaks of a single, submerged continent. The Lidar data showed a meticulously engineered world. Raised stone causeways, some wide enough for ceremonial processions, connected major centers in a vast regional network. Around every known pyramid complex sprawled dense suburban settlements of residential platforms where ordinary families lived. Agricultural terraces and irrigation channels covered hillsides, revealing an intensive, landscape-altering system for feeding a huge population. Defensive walls and fortresses spoke of a society familiar with large-scale conflict. Every feature pointed to a level of organization, communication, and economic interdependence that rivals the classical civilizations of the Mediterranean or Asia. The old estimate of a few million people across the entire Maya world now appears to apply to this one interconnected region alone during its peak. We are likely looking at a society that numbered in the many millions, a demographic powerhouse that transformed a tropical forest into a managed, productive garden. This forces a profound and humbling reassessment. The Maya were not a scattering of brilliant lights in a dark wilderness. They were a vast, interconnected urban civilization, a network of power, trade, and culture operating on a continental scale. Their collapse can no longer be seen as the simple abandonment of a few great cities. It must be understood as the fracturing of a deeply linked system, a failure that rippled across thousands of square miles and affected millions of lives. The jungle, which we mistakenly saw as a barrier that kept their cities apart, was in fact the preserver of their true blueprint. It held the truth in its roots for over a millennium, a truth not of separation, but of stunning, sophisticated connection. If both Angkor and the Maya world were so dramatically misjudged, what does that tell us about the other great green belts of our planet? Could the most famous jungle of all, the Amazon, be hiding a secret just as revolutionary? The answer is emerging, and it challenges the very idea of a pristine wilderness. The greatest misconception of all may be the one we hold about the world's largest rainforest. For centuries, the Amazon has been the ultimate symbol of pristine, untouched nature, a vast green emptiness where only small, nomadic tribes could survive. This vision was not just a scientific assumption, it became a powerful cultural story. But that story is now crumbling under the weight of new evidence, revealing a past so different it redefines the meaning of wilderness itself. Across the basin, from the Upper Xingu in Brazil to the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia, researchers are finding the fingerprints of a forgotten world. They are not discovering stone pyramids, for the ancient Amazonians built with the earth itself. What they find are geometric patterns etched into the landscape, circles, squares, and lines visible only from the air or through careful excavation. These are the remains of monumental earthworks, plaza complexes, and extensive roadways that connected communities across hundreds of miles. The most telling clue, however, lies in the very soil. Scattered throughout the forest are patches of remarkably fertile, dark earth known as terra preta. This is not a natural soil. It is a human creation, a biochar-rich mixture crafted over generations through deliberate practices like slow-burning organic waste and incorporating pottery shards and compost. It is the legacy of intentional, sustained landscape management. These were not temporary camps. They were the foundations of settled, sophisticated societies. The emerging picture is of what some archaeologists call garden cities. Imagine settlements where residential mounds were arranged around central plazas, not in dense urban blocks, but integrated seamlessly into a productive landscape. These communities were surrounded by managed orchards of fruit and nut trees, complex networks of fish ponds and weirs in the wetlands, and vast tracts of land enriched by that dark, anthropogenic soil. This was a form of urbanism in harmony with the forest, a symbiotic system that fed substantial populations without clear-cutting the ecosystem. The scale of this engineered landscape is what forces a staggering demographic revision. Where once the pre-contact Amazon was thought to hold perhaps 1 or 2 million people, new estimates based on this widespread infrastructure suggest a population in the many millions, possibly even exceeding 10 million. The basin was not an empty wilderness waiting to be discovered. It was a populated, domesticated homeland, a tapestry of managed forest gardens and waterways that supported complex societies for millennia. This revelation carries a profound and poignant weight. The catastrophic population decline that followed European contact was not just a tragedy for isolated bands. It was the collapse of an entire continental civilization, a loss so vast it allowed the forest to reclaim its gardens and for the world to forget they were ever there. The Amazon we see today is not a primeval forest. It is, in many ways, a living archive of that lost world, a garden growing over the ruins of its makers. Each dark earth patch, each geometric earthwork, whispers a truth that challenges our deepest assumptions about nature and culture. It forces us to ask, if we have been so wrong about the most famous jungle on Earth, what other truths about our shared human story are still waiting quietly in the soil? The sheer scale of these discoveries points to a fundamental flaw in how we have been counting the past. For generations, historians and archaeologists constructed population estimates using a toolbox that, we now see, was missing its most crucial instruments. Their models relied heavily on what was most easily visible and most permanently built. In the deserts of Egypt or the plains of Mesopotamia, the primary building material was stone or baked mud brick, which endures for millennia. A city's footprint could be mapped from its surviving walls and foundations, allowing for plausible guesses about how many people lived within them. This methodology, however, created a powerful and unconscious bias. It implicitly framed stone as the marker of true civilization and complex demography. When applied to the tropics, this approach failed catastrophically. In rainforest environments, the most practical and abundant building materials are wood, thatch, and earth. These are the substances of life in a living forest, but they are also substances that return to the earth with stunning speed. A monumental wooden palace or a neighborhood of raised earth platforms, after centuries of abandonment, does not leave a stark ruin. It leaves a subtle mound, a faint discoloration in the soil, a pattern easily missed by an explorer on the ground and completely invisible to traditional aerial photography beneath the canopy. The old models were not just counting people, they were counting only the stone skeletons of societies while missing their vast, perishable bodies. This architectural bias was compounded by an ecological one. Scholars long assumed that tropical soils, particularly in the Amazon, were too poor to support intensive, large-scale agriculture. They saw the jungle as a kind of beautiful prison, a place that could only sustain small, scattered groups practicing slash-and-burn farming. The discovery of the widespread, incredibly fertile terra preta soils shatters this assumption. It proves that ancient societies developed sophisticated, sustainable techniques to enrich the land itself, creating the foundation for settled, populous communities. Perhaps the most tragic source of error, however, came from the historical record itself. The first European accounts of these regions often described them as sparsely populated or even empty. For centuries, these reports were taken at face value. We now understand they were snapshots of a world already shattered. The explorers were not witnessing a primordial emptiness. They were walking through the aftermath of an apocalypse. Wave after wave of introduced diseases, to which indigenous populations had no immunity, swept ahead of actual contact, collapsing societies by an estimated 90% or more in some areas. What Europeans described as wilderness was in fact a recently abandoned garden, a landscape still holding the shape of a civilization its new witnesses did not recognize and could not see. The old estimates were not just slightly off, they were based on a profound misunderstanding of environment, technology, and history itself. To move forward, we must adopt a new way of seeing, one that reads the entire landscape as a historical document. It means looking for the raised road, not just the temple at its end. It means analyzing the chemistry of the soil as intently as the carving on a stela. It means understanding that 1 million people can live lightly upon the land, shaping it with wisdom rather than dominating it with stone, and leaving a footprint that is deep but soft. This shift is more than academic. It restores agency, complexity, and scale to cultures we once diminished. It prompts a deeper question: if our methods for counting people were so incomplete, what else about their lives, their beliefs, and their connections have we failed to comprehend? This creates a fundamental challenge for anyone trying to understand the past. The most enduring evidence of a civilization is often the least representative of its daily life. A stone pyramid, a granite temple, a marble statue, these are proclamations of power meant to last for eternity. They are the legacy of the elite, the 1% of the ancient world. But what about the other 99%? Where did they live, work, and raise their families? Their world was built from the materials at hand, and in a rainforest that meant wood for frames, thatch for roofs, and packed earth for floors and walls. These are the materials of practicality, of community, of home. They are also, in the relentless humidity of the tropics, the materials of swift return. A wooden post rots to nothing in a century. A thatched roof vanishes in a generation. An earthen platform without maintenance slowly erodes and is reclaimed by roots and rain. What remains is not a ruin, but a ghost, a subtle disturbance in the earth that is easily missed by the human eye. For centuries, this meant the true scale of tropical societies was archaeologically invisible. We were trying to reconstruct a bustling city by studying only its cathedral, while the surrounding neighborhoods had dissolved back into the soil. The breakthrough came when we stopped looking for buildings and started looking for footprints. This is the quiet revolution of perishable archaeology. It asks us to see the landscape not as a collection of objects, but as a living document inscribed with faint, persistent clues. A Lidar scan might reveal not a wall, but a precise, rectangular depression in the ground, a pattern that signals where a long wooden structure once stood. Ground-penetrating radar can detect the circular shadows of ancient post holes, the skeletal imprint of a house that vanished 1,000 years ago. Most telling of all is the very chemistry of the soil itself. Across the Amazon basin, researchers map the distribution of terra preta, those islands of dark, nutrient-rich earth. This is not a natural phenomenon, it is a cultural one, a direct result of sustained human habitation and waste management. Where you find this enriched soil, you find the fingerprints of a settled community. Scattered within it are often countless ceramic shards, the broken remains of cooking pots and storage vessels, the mundane artifacts of daily life. These fragments tell a story of permanence. They indicate not a temporary camp, but a home that was occupied for generations, where meals were cooked, children were raised, and lives were woven into the land. Learning to read these subtle signatures is like learning a new language, one written in soil nutrients, pollen grains, and microscopic charcoal particles from ancient cooking fires. It allows us to map the homes and gardens of the common people, the farmers, artisans, and families who formed the overwhelming majority of these societies. They were the true economic engine, the labor force that built the causeways, filled the reservoirs, and sustained the elites in their stone palaces. To finally count the people of the ancient tropics, we cannot just measure the monuments of the powerful. We must learn to see the quiet, enduring mark of the everyday, the proof of life written not in stone but in the earth itself. And if these gentle traces can reveal populations in the millions, What does that tell us about the sophistication required to govern, to feed, and to connect such a vast and dispersed world? Feeding millions in a rainforest seems like an impossible equation. The sheer abundance of life masks a fundamental scarcity. The soil is often thin and nutrient-poor, quickly exhausted by traditional farming. For generations, this ecological reality was the trump card against any theory of large, settled populations in the tropics. The logic seemed unassailable: no fertile soil, no surplus food, no great cities. But that logic was based on a modern assumption that agriculture must look like our own, vast fields of a single crop. The truth is far more ingenious. These civilizations did not fight their environment. They learned its language and wrote new rules for abundance. They became master architects of invisible systems, turning perceived limitations into engines of sustenance. The Maya, for instance, did not just farm the dry uplands. In the low-lying wetlands, areas once dismissed as useless swamps, Lidar and excavation have revealed immense grids of canal and field systems. They were constructing raised planting beds bordered by waterways that regulated moisture, provided irrigation, and teemed with fish and aquatic life. This was a symbiotic, multi-crop system that produced food year-round, a managed aquatic garden on a staggering scale. Similarly, their hillsides were not left wild. They were sculpted into intricate terraces that prevented erosion, captured rainwater, and created microclimates for different crops. This was not subsistence, it was landscape-scale engineering for high-yield production. In Cambodia, the Khmer solution was hydraulic. Their massive reservoirs or barrays were not just ceremonial pools. They were the beating heart of an agricultural metropolis. These vast man-made lakes captured the torrential monsoon rains, storing water to irrigate rice paddies throughout the long dry season. Canals distributed this lifeblood across the urban expanse, turning seasonal rainfall into a reliable, perennial resource. It was a civilization literally built on water management, its population directly tied to the volume it could store and redirect. The most profound answer, however, emerged from the Amazon. Here, the ancient solution was to create fertility itself. The widespread terra preta soils are now understood as a monumental achievement in soil science. By deliberately incorporating charcoal, organic waste, and pottery shards into the ground, these societies engineered a self-renewing, hyper-fertile foundation. This was not a lucky accident. It was a sustained, generational practice that transformed poor tropical dirt into enduring black gold. Around their settlements, they practiced agroforestry, cultivating mosaic gardens of fruit trees, nut palms, and medicinal plants within the forest canopy, mimicking nature's diversity while providing a continuous, sustainable harvest. They were not clearing the forest, they were cultivating a productive, edible version of it. Each of these systems represents a profound intellectual leap. They are evidence of deep, accumulated ecological knowledge passed down over centuries. This was a science of place, a sophisticated understanding of water flow, soil chemistry, and plant relationships that we are only now beginning to decode with modern technology. The evidence is clear. They developed the means to feed very large, permanent populations. The agricultural foundation necessary to support those revised population estimates of millions does exist, etched into the wetlands of Guatemala, the reservoir banks of Angkor, and the very earth of the Amazon. This changes the question entirely. It is no longer, how could they have fed so many people? It is, what kind of society was capable of designing and maintaining such elegant, large-scale solutions to the fundamental challenge of life. These intricate agricultural systems point to a society of immense coordination, a level of organization that extends far beyond the farm and into the very blueprint of the city itself. The discovery of these vast populations forces a parallel revelation about their living spaces. We must abandon the cliché of the chaotic, haphazard jungle village. The truth revealed by the ground beneath the canopy is one of deliberate, sophisticated urban design. The Lidar maps of a Maya center like Tikal do not show a random scattering of structures. They reveal a carefully orchestrated urban plan. Wide causeways form a deliberate grid connecting temple complexes, palace districts, and residential neighborhoods with geometric precision. Major structures are aligned with celestial events, embedding astronomical knowledge into the city's skeleton. This was not organic sprawl, it was intentional zoning, separating ceremonial, administrative, and domestic spaces while connecting them with formal processional routes. Such a layout speaks of a powerful central authority capable of surveying land, mobilizing labor, and enforcing a grand, collective vision over generations. It is the signature of a complex state, not a simple chieftaincy. Half a world away, Angkor's design operated on an even grander symbolic scale. The entire metropolis was conceived as a physical model of the Hindu-Buddhist cosmos. The central temple mountain, Angkor Wat, represents the mythical Mount Meru, the axis of the world. The surrounding moat mirrors the cosmic ocean, and the sequential enclosures and gateways chart a spiritual journey from the worldly to the divine. The vast reservoirs were not just practical, they were cosmological statements, reflecting the heavenly abodes of the gods. Every major element was positioned according to a sacred geography, transforming the entire urban landscape into a living mandala, a machine for aligning human society with the divine order. This level of symbolic planning required not just engineers, but philosophers, priests, and astronomers working in concert with the king. In the Amazon, the design principles took a different, equally intelligent form. Across sites in the Upper Xingu and elsewhere, archaeologists find a recurring pattern: the circular plaza village. Residential mounds are arranged in a ring around a central, cleared ceremonial ground. These villages are then linked to one another by remarkably straight, broad roads that cut through the forest, forming a regional network of connected communities in a radial pattern. This layout fostered social cohesion, with the plaza serving as the stage for communal life, ritual, and governance. The straight roads facilitated communication, trade, and mutual defense, integrating discrete settlements into a larger social and political whole. This is a masterclass in landscape-scale planning for a dispersed society. What unites these diverse blueprints is a profound integration with the environment. These were not cities imposed upon the jungle, they were cities woven from it. Waterways were incorporated as transportation corridors and spiritual symbols. Green spaces, garden plots, and managed orchards were embedded within the urban fabric, blurring the line between town and country. This design philosophy promoted sustainability, microclimates, and a direct connection to the source of food and water. It challenges the Western historical bias that equates urban sophistication with dense, stone-packed cities and clear separation from nature. These jungle metropolises were masterpieces of environmental architecture, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding that the health of the society was inextricable from the health of its living context. Their plans were not primitive, they were prescient, blueprints for a sustainable urbanism written in earth and aligned with the stars, hidden in plain sight for 1,000 years. These grand urban designs did not exist in splendid isolation. A city's true power is measured not just by its monuments, but by its reach, by the threads that connect it to a wider world. The discovery of vast, engineered roadways beneath the jungle canopy is perhaps the most compelling physical proof of the scale and sophistication of these lost societies. These were not mere footpaths, but monumental infrastructure projects that stitched entire regions into a single, functioning system. Take the Maya Sakpiab, the famed white roads. These were elevated causeways, paved with limestone plaster and bordered by low retaining walls that ran arrow straight for dozens of miles across some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. They connected major political capitals like Koba and Yaksuna, traversing swamps and hills with an engineering determination that defied the wilderness. A Sakbi was not just a road, it was a statement of political will and logistical mastery, a permanent, physical bond between city-states that facilitated the movement of armies, trade caravans, and pilgrims. In Southeast Asia, water served as the highway. The extensive canal network of the Khmer Empire was a dual-purpose marvel. While it regulated water for agriculture, it also formed a liquid grid for transportation. Goods, people, and ideas could flow from the suburbs to the great reservoirs and onward to the heart of Angkor with an efficiency that rivaled any Roman road system. This connectivity turned a dispersed metropolis into a cohesive economic unit. Most startling of all are the recent discoveries in the Amazon. Lidar has begun to trace the faint, linear signatures of ancient causeways and raised berms cutting through the forest in the Llanos de Mojos of Bolivia and elsewhere. These are not random trails, they are formalized pathways, often connecting geometric earthwork complexes and plaza villages across hundreds of kilometers. They suggest a social landscape where communities were in regular, structured contact, a network that enabled the exchange of regional specialties like stone tools, ceramics, or rare feathers across an area once thought to be fragmented and isolated. The implications of this web are profound. First, it speaks directly to population density. You do not invest the immense labor to build and maintain a 100-kilometer paved road through a swamp unless there is significant traffic and a pressing need to connect substantial populations at either end. This infrastructure only makes economic sense if the lands it links are populated enough to justify its existence. Second, it reveals a level of administrative control and long-term planning that is the hallmark of complex governance. Maintaining a regional network requires organized labor, resource allocation, and perhaps even standardized rules of passage or tolls. It implies a central authority capable of projecting its power across the landscape. Finally, this connectivity was the lifeblood of cultural cohesion. The exchange was not limited to material goods. Along these roads and canals traveled languages, religious concepts, artistic styles, and technological innovations. This constant flow of ideas helped create the recognizable cultural uniformity we see across the Maya world or the Khmer Empire, despite their political divisions. It provided a resilience, a shared identity that could withstand local conflicts or environmental shifts. These ancient highways, now silent beneath roots and soil, are the forgotten arteries of civilizations we are only beginning to comprehend. They tell us that the true map of the ancient tropics was not a scattering of dots, but a luminous web of connection, and the scale of that web is a direct measure of the number of lives it was built to serve. These networks of roads and canals all converged on a single, non-negotiable requirement: water. In the tropics, where seasons swing violently between deluge and drought, the mastery of water was not a luxury, it was the very definition of civilization. The ability to capture the monsoon's fury, store its lifeblood, and distribute it with precision transformed precarious survival into the foundation of empire. The most breathtaking example remains the hydraulic heart of the Khmer. Their system was a machine built from earth and stone, a landscape-scale engine designed to tame an entire climate. The Great Barrays, like the West Barray stretching over 5 kilometers in length, were not just reservoirs, they were strategic water batteries. They captured the overwhelming rains of the wet season, preventing catastrophic floods while creating a vast insurance policy against the parching dry months. An intricate lattice of canals then channeled this stored water to the rice paddies that fed the metropolis, turning a single annual harvest into the possibility of 2 or 3. This was a society that thought in watersheds and engineered its prosperity. You do not redirect rivers and excavate lakes the size of inland seas for a small town. This scale of infrastructure is a direct, measurable proxy for population. The math is written in the mud. The volume of water they managed correlates directly to the number of mouths they needed to feed. Across the Pacific, the Maya faced a different water challenge. In regions without large rivers, they became masters of catchment and conservation. Within cities like Tikal, they constructed immense plaster-lined reservoirs, some capable of holding millions of gallons of rainwater collected from paved plazas and temple runoffs. These were not mere cisterns, they were central, sacred features of the urban plan, ensuring the city's survival through the annual dry season. Their canal systems in the wetlands, visible now only from the air, created productive farmlands from swamps, a dual-purpose system that provided both food and water management. This hydrological ingenuity extended to the high Andes, where the Tiwanaku culture flourished beside Lake Titicaca over 1,000 years ago. There, in the thin air of the Altiplano, they engineered a stunning solution to frost and poor soil, the raised field system. By digging a network of canals and piling the nutrient-rich muck into long, wide planting beds, they created a revolutionary microclimate. The surrounding water absorbed heat during the day and radiated it back at night, protecting crops from killing frost. The canals teemed with aquatic plants and fish, providing additional fertilizer and protein. It was a closed-loop, symbiotic agricultural engine that turned a marginal environment into a breadbasket. Each of these projects, from the barres of Angkor to the raised fields of the Andes, shares a common signature. They required a breathtaking investment of coordinated labor, precise astronomical and engineering knowledge, and generations of dedicated management. They are the work of societies with the organizational capacity to plan decades or even centuries ahead, to command the labor of thousands, and to maintain these systems across lifetimes. The blueprints for these waterworks were not drawn on parchment, they were written directly into the earth itself. They are silent, enduring testimonials, not just to technological skill, but to the vast, organized populations whose survival depended on their flawless function. The water they moved is long gone, evaporated into the sky, but the shapes they left behind hold a permanent truth, the ghostly imprint of multitudes. This elegant fragility now casts their final chapters in a new and sobering light. The very systems that enabled millions to thrive may have contained the subtle seeds of their own undoing. With these revised, much higher population figures, the classic question of why great civilizations fall demands a fresh answer. The evidence from both Angkor and the Maya world suggests a story not of sudden catastrophe, but of a slow, mounting pressure on the environment they had so expertly engineered. A metropolis of several 100,000 or even 1 million exerts an immense, constant demand. Forests were cleared for agriculture, for construction, and for fuel. Over generations, this deforestation could have altered local rainfall patterns and accelerated soil erosion. The intricate water networks, those masterpieces of hydraulic engineering, faced a relentless strain. Canals silted up, reservoirs gradually filled with sediment, and the meticulous balance of the system grew more precarious with each passing year. These societies were walking a tightrope of their own creation, and their margin for error grew thinner as their numbers grew larger. Then the climate shifted. Paleoclimate data from ancient lake beds and cave formations tells us that both regions experienced periods of severe, multi-decade drought during the times of their decline. For a small village, a few dry years are a hardship. For a mega-city entirely dependent on a calibrated, continent-scale water machine, the same drought can be a death sentence. A depleted reservoir or a silted canal that once served a modest town becomes a catastrophic failure when it is the sole lifeline for a vast urban population. The tragedy lies in the irony. The sophistication that allowed them to reach such heights also made them uniquely vulnerable to the very forces they had sought to control. This is not a story of primitive collapse, but of a complex system pushed beyond its breaking point. It encourages us to see their end not as a mysterious failure, but as a profound case study in the long-term challenges of sustainability. These were societies that solved the puzzle of feeding and organizing millions in a difficult environment, a monumental achievement. Their legacy is a double-edged lesson, a testament to human ingenuity and a cautionary tale about the limits of any system, no matter how brilliantly conceived. It asks us a difficult, resonant question. In our own era of global interconnection and environmental strain, what tightropes are we walking, and how well are we maintaining the delicate systems upon which our world now depends? The founding moment of an empire is often shrouded in legend, but sometimes it is simply hidden beneath the trees. For the Khmer Empire, the story of its beginning was missing a first chapter, a gap between myth and the undeniable stone of Angkor. Historians knew from inscriptions of a sacred mountain city called Mahendraparvata, the first capital, but its location on the remote Phnom Kulen Plateau had defied discovery for centuries. The jungle here is exceptionally dense, a tangled fortress that turned every expedition into a grueling search for individual ruins with no sense of their connection. Then the lasers flew over that mist-shrouded highland. In a single survey, the digital veil was lifted, and the legendary city materialized as a complete, breathtaking urban plan. The Lidar maps did not just show a few scattered temples. They revealed the full grid of a planned city, with orderly city blocks defined by a network of roads and canals, the foundations of temples and community ponds, and the remnants of an ambitious but unfinished water management system featuring large dams. This was not a proto-village or a ceremonial site. It was a capital designed and laid out with clear intent from its very inception. The discovery of Mahendraparvata is like finding the original architectural blueprint for an empire. It proves that the Khmer vision for a vast, engineered landscape was not a late innovation born at Angkor. That vision was present at the very start. Here, on this plateau, the foundational template was established, the template of a city integrated with its water sources, of temples positioned within a coordinated urban grid, of a society organized for large-scale transformation of the land. This pushes the timeline of Khmer sophistication back by centuries and fills that critical gap in the historical narrative. It shows a direct lineage of planning, a through line from the ambitious but perhaps struggling systems on the plateau to the flawless, monumental hydraulic machine of the Angkor Plain. The empire did not emerge fully formed. It evolved, it learned, and it scaled up an idea that was present from day one. Perhaps most poignant is the evidence of that early struggle. The large dams found at Mahendraparvata appear to have silted up quickly, suggesting the water management system here may have failed, possibly prompting the move to the more hydrologically favorable location where Angkor would later rise. This turns their history from a simple success story into a more human narrative of trial, adaptation, and resilience. They tried a grand design in one place, faced its limitations, and carried the core idea to a new location where it could flourish beyond imagination. Finding such a complete city layout in an area long written off as impenetrable wilderness underscores a humbling truth. An entire founding capital of a major civilization can vanish from human knowledge, not into the sea or under desert sands, but simply beneath the living green of a forest. It forces us to wonder how many other origin stories, how many other first chapters of great cultures are still waiting in the quiet earth, their city grids sleeping under roots, their founding dreams silently holding their shape. The discovery of Mahendraparvata reveals how a founding city can vanish, but it is not the only one. Far to the east, in the Llanos de Mojos region of the Bolivian Amazon, another monumental complex has emerged from the digital shadows, challenging our ideas of what an Amazonian city could be. This is the Kotoka site, a vast arrangement of earthworks that covers an area larger than 50 square miles. Recent Lidar mapping has peeled back the savanna and forest to reveal its astonishing form, a symmetrical complex of raised mounds, precisely aligned causeways, and deep, encircling moats. This is not a random collection of hills. It is a deliberate, geometric layout, a colossal signature etched into the earth itself. The central precinct features a huge, flat-topped mound, likely a platform for ceremonial structures or elite residences, surrounded by a series of concentric causeways and canals that radiate outward like the spokes of a wheel. The scale is staggering, a feat of landscape engineering that would have required the coordinated labor of thousands over generations. This was not a village. It was a regional capital, a hub of political power and spiritual life, potentially home to tens of thousands of people. Kotoka did not stand alone. The same survey that revealed its grandeur also mapped hundreds of similar, though smaller, earthwork complexes across the region, each with its own plazas, mounds, and connecting roadways. Together, they form a constellation of settlements, a networked society spread across a landscape we once called empty wilderness. These are not the temporary camps of nomadic foragers. They are the permanent foundations of a settled, organized, and populous world. The earthworks themselves are the concrete evidence, the monumental answer to the empty Amazon theory. They required a profound understanding of hydrology to build in a seasonally flooded plain, using moats and canals for defense, transportation, and perhaps even aquaculture. The geometric precision speaks of advanced surveying knowledge and a shared cultural template for organizing sacred and social space. This was a civilization that moved mountains of earth to shape their world. Kotoka stands as a powerful testament to a social complexity we are only beginning to map. It hints at a previously unknown chapter of urban life, one defined not by stone pyramids, but by earthen monuments, not by dense city blocks, but by integrated garden cities connected across a managed landscape. It forces a simple, profound question. If a site of this scale and sophistication remained hidden until now, how many other centers of power and population are still waiting, their stories written in the quiet soil, for our technology to finally give them a voice? The earth itself holds a memory of the sky, deep within ancient lake beds and in the silent, slow-growing layers of cave stalagmites. Scientists are reading a climatic diary of the past. By extracting slender cores of sediment from the bottom of lakes like Lake Chichencanab in Mexico, they can analyze microscopic fossils and chemical isotopes that record centuries of rainfall and drought. Stalagmites forming drip by drip over millennia trap similar chemical signatures within their rings, creating a timeline of atmospheric conditions. This field, paleoclimatology, is giving voice to the silent environmental pressures these lost civilizations faced. It reveals that the world they built was not a stable stage, but a dynamic and sometimes unforgiving partner. For the Maya, the evidence points to a series of severe, multi-generational droughts striking at the very peak of their population and urban complexity. Imagine the strain on a society of millions when the rains they depended upon began to fail year after year. Their reservoirs would have dwindled, their engineered wetland gardens may have dried, and the social contract that demanded such intricate maintenance could have frayed under the stress. Climate did not act alone, but it applied a relentless pressure that amplified every other challenge, from political rivalry to resource scarcity. This shifts our view of their history from a mysterious vanishing to a story of resilience tested by a changing world. They were not passive victims of fate, but active participants in a long, difficult adaptation. Some cities may have been abandoned, while others persisted or transformed, their populations dispersing into new patterns of life. The jungle, always waiting, then began its patient work of reclamation, weaving roots through plaster and covering causeways with soil, sealing the cities away for centuries. Today, a new and troubling climate dynamic is at play. increased droughts and more frequent, intense forest fires, linked to modern global shifts, are damaging the very canopy that has protected these sites. In some cases, this has led to accidental discoveries, as fire scars or dead trees reveal the geometric outlines of structures below. Yet this is a perilous revelation. The exposure that allows archaeologists to see also opens these vulnerable sites to looting and accelerates erosion from wind and rain once the protective root network is gone. It is a race against time where the same forces that hide history can also destroy it. Understanding this ancient interplay between climate and culture does more than explain the past, it reframes the entire human story. These societies were engaged in a continuous conversation with their environment, innovating, adapting, and sometimes facing limits. Their history is not a simple arc of rise and fall, but a complex narrative of interaction, a reminder that civilization is always a negotiation with the natural world. This perspective invites a deeper question as we now face our own era of climatic change. What lessons might we draw from those who, long ago, learned to thrive in the jungle only to confront a sky that slowly withheld its rain? The lasers see the shapes in the earth, but the stories live in the memory of the people. For many indigenous communities across the Amazon and Southeast Asia, these technological revelations are not a surprise, but a powerful validation. They are a scientific echo of oral histories passed down for generations, stories that speak of ancient cities, of ancestors who shaped the land, and of a time when the forest was a garden. In the Brazilian Amazon, tales of the Tapajós chiefdom, a powerful society encountered by early Europeans, describe a populous and sophisticated culture. Modern archaeology, finding vast expanses of terra preta and complex earthworks in that very region, is now mapping the physical proof of that history. Similarly, narratives among various groups speak of encantados or enchanted cities, places of power and ancestral home that are to be respected and sometimes avoided. These were often dismissed as myth by outsiders, yet they persist as a living map, a cultural memory of the landscape's deep past. This partnership between technology and traditional knowledge is not new, but it is fundamental. For generations, long before Lidar planes ever flew, local guides and community members have led researchers to significant sites, sharing their understanding of the forest's subtle signs. They know where the earth is dark and fertile, where the pottery shards wash out after a rain, and where the old stories say a plaza once stood. This collaboration corrects a long and damaging historical narrative. The colonial concept of terra nullius, meaning nobody's land, was used to justify the seizure of territories that were, in truth, deeply known, named, and managed. The forests were not empty, they were homelands, and the new discoveries are proving that this connection stretches back not just centuries, but millennia. Acknowledging this indigenous wisdom does more than fill in gaps on a map. It restores a vital dimension to the story, one of continuity. The people living in these regions today are not separate from the ancient builders. They are often their direct descendants, inheritors of a legacy written in both earth and epic. Their knowledge represents a different way of seeing, one that perceives the forest not as a wilderness to be conquered, but as a library, a pharmacy, and a chronicle. When a researcher listens to a community elder describe the location of an ancestral site, they are accessing a database of human experience preserved across hundreds of years. This is a profound shift in perspective. The goal is no longer just to discover a lost city, but to understand its place in a continuous human story. The forest does indeed hold memories, and its traditional stewards have been listening to them all along. To uncover the full story, we must learn to listen too. A discovery made by laser light can cast a long and complicated shadow. The very technology that reveals these lost cities also makes them vulnerable, transforming them instantly from hidden history into a target. The moment a site is mapped and its location becomes known, a clock starts ticking. Looters, armed with GPS coordinates and simple metal detectors, can descend upon these places, digging pits through ancient homes and temples in search of saleable artifacts. The destruction they cause is catastrophic and permanent, erasing the context that gives an object its true meaning, turning a sacred heirloom into a mere trinket. This creates a profound ethical tension at the heart of modern archaeology. How do we balance the urgent desire to know with the imperative to protect? The answer is increasingly found not in more advanced scanners, but in deeper human relationships. There is a vital and growing movement toward collaborative archaeology, a practice that fundamentally rethinks who holds the keys to the past. Instead of a team of outside experts arriving with a predetermined plan, these projects are co-designed from the very beginning with the descendant communities connected to the land. This means local and indigenous knowledge guides where to look and how to interpret what is found. It ensures that the economic benefits of any resulting tourism or educational programs flow back to the community, not just to distant institutions. This collaborative model transforms the role of the archaeologist from an extractor of data into a partner in stewardship. The implications extend far beyond the academic. In many parts of the world, particularly across the Amazon, these scientific discoveries are becoming powerful tools for cultural and territorial rights. By providing irrefutable physical proof of long-term occupation and sophisticated landscape management, Lidar maps and archaeological findings can support indigenous land claims against deforestation or industrial encroachment. The data does not just reveal a lost city, it documents a homeland offering a legal and moral foundation for its continued protection. This shifts the entire purpose of the endeavor. The goal is no longer simply to fill a museum case or rewrite a textbook chapter. It becomes an act of cultural reaffirmation, using the tools of science to validate living histories and strengthen the sovereignty of those who have safeguarded the memory of these places for generations. The ethical path forward requires us to see these jungle cities not as ruins to be claimed, but as legacies to be honored. It asks a difficult but essential question of every new discovery: who does this history truly belong to? And how can its revelation serve the future of the people to whom it matters most? The past once found is not a trophy. It is a responsibility, a conversation between generations that must be conducted with humility and care. The partnership between technology and tradition is only the beginning of this new way of seeing. While Lidar has peeled back the forest canopy, the next generation of tools is designed to peer directly into the earth itself, promising a view of the ancient world with a clarity we have never before possessed. This is the frontier of non-invasive archaeology, a future where we may understand a civilization without ever lifting a shovel. One such tool is ground-penetrating radar, a device that sends radio waves into the soil and reads the echoes that bounce back from buried structures. Think of it as a medical ultrasound for the landscape, revealing the hidden foundations of buildings, the outlines of old plazas, and even potential burial chambers, all mapped in 3 dimensions beneath our feet. Another astonishing technique comes from the realm of particle physics, muon tomography. Cosmic rays from deep space constantly shower the Earth, and by placing special detectors around or beneath a large structure, like a pyramid, scientists can measure how these particles are absorbed. Denser materials, like hidden chambers filled with air, create a shadow in the muon flow, allowing researchers to literally see through solid stone. Beyond seeing shapes, we are learning to read the very chemistry of the past. Advanced satellite spectroscopy can now detect subtle mineral signatures and changes in plant health from orbit, hinting at buried ruins or ancient farming practices across entire regions. Yet perhaps the most transformative shift is happening not in the field but in the digital lab. The vast Lidar datasets covering thousands of square miles are simply too large for any human team to analyze completely. This is where artificial intelligence enters the story. Machine learning algorithms are being trained to scan these digital landscapes, automatically identifying the telltale signatures of ancient roads, house platforms, and irrigation canals with incredible speed and consistency. What once took years of painstaking analysis can now begin in a matter of weeks, accelerating discovery at an exponential rate. The insights continue at the microscopic level. Portable DNA sequencers and isotope analyzers are becoming field-ready tools. From a tiny fragment of bone, researchers can now extract stories that were once forever lost, determining an individual's diet, tracing their geographical origins through the water they drank, and even reconstructing family trees across generations. This turns a single resting place into a window onto migration, trade, and social structure. Together, these technologies are weaving a new kind of historical record. We are moving toward a future where we can virtually reconstruct an entire ancient society, from its grand city plans down to the meals of its people, with minimal physical disturbance to the sites we study. This ethical approach preserves these places for future generations while satisfying our deep hunger to understand. The promise is a cascade of revelations, each discovery layering more detail onto our map of the human story, proving that the greatest chapters of our past are not lost, merely waiting for us to develop the eyes to see them. The stereotype of the primitive jungle tribe is a ghost story that archaeology is finally laying to rest. The evidence from beneath the canopy does not show small bands clinging to survival in a hostile green prison. It reveals the opposite: vast, innovative civilizations that were not at the mercy of their environment, but were its masterful collaborators. They were not helpless within the jungle, they were its architects. The raised causeways and canals are the work of civil engineers. The celestial alignments of their temples speak of astronomers. The terraced hillsides and engineered soils belonged to agronomists of astonishing skill. Their city grids, woven into the living forest, are the legacy of urban planners thinking on a continental scale. This correction is far more than an academic footnote. It dismantles a narrative that has done real and lasting harm. For centuries, the idea of an empty, untamed wilderness populated only by simple, scattered tribes was used to justify the seizure of land and the marginalization of its people. It framed entire continents as blank spaces waiting for outside direction, erasing the deep history of those who had called them home for millennia. The truth uncovered by lasers and soil science offers a powerful counter-narrative. These were societies of profound sophistication and resilience, capable of sustaining populations in the millions through ingenuity and deep ecological knowledge. Recognizing this history reshapes our respect for the cultural and intellectual achievements born in the world's tropical forests. It challenges us to listen to the living descendants of these builders not as relics of a primitive past, but as inheritors of a monumental legacy. Their traditional knowledge about the forest, once dismissed as folklore, is now being understood as the accumulated science of generations who learn to thrive in complex ecosystems. This shift in perspective is not about assigning blame for the past, but about building a more accurate and equitable understanding for the future. When we replace the myth of the primitive tribe with the reality of the ancient metropolis, we do more than rewrite history books. We restore a chapter of human genius, and in doing so, we open the door to a deeper appreciation for the enduring wisdom that still lives within the world's great forests. This new map of our past is not merely adding a few dots to the edges of the historical atlas, it is redrawing the entire chart of human development. For too long, the grand narrative of civilization followed a predictable path, shining its brightest light on the river valleys of the Nile, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Yellow River, before moving its focus to the classical worlds of Greece and Rome. This story, while true, was profoundly incomplete. It placed the tropical world in the role of a passive backdrop, a green void between the celebrated centers of progress. The discoveries beneath the canopy shatter that old geography. They force us to acknowledge that the equatorial regions were not the periphery of history, but independent, powerful centers of it. Here, in the heat and humidity we once thought limiting, societies achieved urban scales and organizational complexity that rivaled anything in the ancient Mediterranean. The Maya, the Khmer, and the Amazonian cultures were not derivative echoes of other civilizations. They were brilliant originals, solving the unique puzzles of their environments with staggering ingenuity. This realization does more than just add new chapters. It changes the genre of the entire book. The human story is no longer a single, linear march from a handful of cradles. It is a symphony of simultaneous innovation, with multiple distinct melodies of civilization rising in harmony across the globe. The ancient world was not a sparsely populated landscape dotted with isolated cities. It was a crowded, bustling, and astonishingly interconnected place. Millions more people than we ever imagined were building roads through swamps, raising pyramids to the stars, and turning forests into gardens. This revised demographic weight tilts the axis of history. It means the tropical world held a far greater share of humanity's total population and creative energy than our models ever allowed. This challenges deep-seated, often Eurocentric, models of historical progress that implicitly valued certain kinds of architecture, certain forms of writing, or certain environments as markers of advancement. The jungle cities prove that advancement wears many faces. A society that builds with earth and manages an entire watershed is no less sophisticated than one that builds with marble and manages an empire through written law. They simply left a different kind of record, one we are only now learning to read. The implications are humbling and exhilarating. We are witnessing a great correction, a long overdue homecoming for these lost metropolises in our collective memory. This more accurate, more diverse picture of the past does not diminish the wonders of the classical world. It enriches our understanding of human potential by revealing the full spectrum of its expression. It shows us that the drive to create complex society, to organize, to build, and to reach for the divine is a universal human trait, one that blossomed not in one type of place, but in many. The canopy kept these truths safe, a living archive preserving a legacy of genius until our perspective finally grew wide enough and our tools sharp enough to see it. What other harmonies in the human symphony, played in environments we have overlooked, are still waiting for their moment to be heard? Their legacy offers more than a rewritten history. It presents a living question for our own time. These civilizations achieved something modern societies are still striving for. They sustained large, complex populations for centuries, not by conquering nature, but by collaborating with it. The Maya did not simply clear the forest, they cultivated it, creating a mosaic of useful trees, crops, and medicinal plants that mimicked the natural ecosystem while providing food, shelter, and materials. This was a form of agroforestry, a polyculture system that maintained biodiversity, prevented soil erosion, and created a resilient food web. Similarly, the Amazonian dark earth stands as a monumental achievement in soil science, a human-made technology that turned infertile ground into a self-renewing, hyper-fertile foundation. These were not accidental discoveries. They were the result of deep, accumulated ecological knowledge passed down through generations. Their water management, from the Khmer reservoirs to the Maya wetland canals, was about working with the hydrological cycle, capturing abundance in the wet season to ensure survival through the dry. This represents a fundamentally different philosophy, one where the environment is not an external resource to be mined, but a partner in a long-term relationship. Their prolonged success demonstrates a powerful truth. high population density and environmental health are not mutually exclusive goals. They can be achieved together with the right knowledge, careful observation, and a societal commitment to balance. This insight moves their story from academic curiosity to urgent contemporary relevance. In a world facing climate change, deforestation, and soil degradation, the techniques of these ancient societies offer valuable blueprints. Modern agricultural science is now actively studying the composition of terra preta to develop sustainable soil amendments. Urban planners look to the low-density, green integrated models of Angkor or the Maya garden cities for inspiration in designing climate-resilient communities that blend living space with productive landscape. Their adaptations were born of necessity, refined over centuries, and proven on a continental scale. Their eventual struggles in some regions, often linked to prolonged drought or the overextension of their magnificent systems, serve as equally vital cautionary tales. They remind us that even the most elegant human systems exist within larger natural ones, and that ignoring those limits carries profound consequences. This duality is their greatest gift to us, a pair of lessons etched in earth and canal. They show us pathways to a symbiotic existence, and they warn us of the cliffs that lie at the edge of overreach. In their ruins, we do not find just the bones of the past. We find a mirror for our future, reflecting both the brilliance of human innovation and the timeless necessity of listening to the world we shape. For every digital map we create, there remain continents of shadow. The known discoveries, as staggering as they are, represent only the first few pages of a story written across the entire equatorial belt. Vast, critical regions of our planet still lie untouched by the laser's gaze. The dense, almost impenetrable rainforests of the Congo Basin in Central Africa hold one of the last great archaeological mysteries. This is a region with a deep human history, but its scale and terrain have defied systematic study. Could its river networks conceal the footprints of societies that managed the world's second-largest rainforest, just as their counterparts did in the Amazon? We simply do not know yet. Across the globe, the countless islands of the Indonesian and Philippine archipelagos, draped in volcanic slopes and thick jungle, are another immense blank canvas. These are crossroads of ancient sea routes, places where cultures met and mingled for millennia. What urban centers or ceremonial complexes might be hidden on their remote highlands, places where the canopy has never been peeled back? The potential is as vast as the ocean that surrounds them, even within the Amazon, where our understanding has been so revolutionized. Only a tiny fraction of the basin has been surveyed with this new technology. For every Kotoka that is found, there are likely dozens of similar complexes still sleeping beneath the green veil. Each represents not just a lost city, but an entire cultural world waiting to reintroduce itself. This is the tangible thrill of the unknown. It is not abstract, it has coordinates. Take the Mosquitia region of Honduras, one of the most remote and biologically intense rainforests in Central America. For centuries, local legend and explorer accounts spoke of La Ciudad Blanca, the White City, sometimes called the City of the Monkey God. Many searched for it and failed, their stories adding to its mythic status. Then, just a few years ago, a Lidar survey followed by a ground expedition confirmed the existence of not one, but two major settlements deep within Mosquitia, complete with plazas, pyramids, and carved stone artifacts. It was a modern discovery of a lost city, proving that the legends were rooted in truth. This single find underscores a powerful reality. Where there is persistent myth, there is often a kernel of historical memory. This logic turns our eyes to other legendary places. In the cloud forests of Peru, the story of Paititi, a final refuge of the Inca filled with gold, has driven quests for centuries. While the Golden City may be allegory, it could easily point to a very real major settlement in the remote eastern foothills of the Andes, a region notoriously difficult to access. Similarly, the highland valleys and coastal jungles of Papua New Guinea, one of the most culturally diverse places on Earth, are almost entirely unexplored archaeologically from the air. What forms of urban life or landscape engineering might have developed in such profound isolation? The driving force for all of this is no longer just curiosity, it is a profound responsibility. With climate change and deforestation accelerating, we are in a race against time to map these cultural landscapes before they are lost or irrevocably damaged. Each new flight of a Lidar-equipped plane is an act of preservation, capturing a digital snapshot of a heritage that exists in a fragile, physical state. Every survey holds the potential to unveil another complete chapter in the human story, to restore another civilization to its rightful place on our historical map. This ongoing process is a beautiful correction to a static view of the past. History is not a closed book, its final chapters written in stone long ago. It is a living library, and we have only just been given the master key. The next great discovery is not a matter of if, but where, and with each new scan, we are reminded that our ancestors were far more numerous, far more ingenious, and far more connected than we ever dared to dream. A shimmering digital map is not the end of the discovery, it is the first word of a new conversation. The ghostly patterns of causeways and plazas revealed by Lidar are breathtaking, but they are silent. They show the skeleton of a city, but not the life that animated it. The true work of archaeology begins in the quiet, methodical task of turning that data into a narrative, of listening for the heartbeat in the empty streets. This is a deeply interdisciplinary detective story, a process called ground truthing. Teams must take the coordinates from the scan and walk into the jungle, finding the exact spot where the laser saw a rectangular depression or an unusual mound. There they carefully excavate, not to dig up the whole city, but to take strategic samples to touch the reality behind the pixels. They collect soil from the floors of vanished homes, sifting for microscopic clues like ancient pollen, charcoal from cooking fires, or phytoliths, the tiny silica skeletons of plants that reveal what was grown or eaten. They search for artifacts, not just the ceremonial objects, but the broken pottery, the stone tools, the everyday debris of existence. A single ceramic shard can tell a story of trade networks, of technological style, of a meal shared 1,000 years ago. To answer the most fundamental question of all, when scientists turn to radiocarbon dating, by analyzing the decay of carbon isotopes in a piece of charcoal, a seed, or even a bone, they can anchor a structure or a layer of soil to a specific century. This creates a chronological scaffold, allowing researchers to see how a city grew, which neighborhoods were built first, and how the urban plan evolved over generations. Each of these threads, the soil chemistry, the artifact style, the precise date, is a separate color in a vast tapestry. The archaeologist's role is to weave them together. A cluster of residential platforms near a canal, dated to the same period and filled with domestic pottery and food remains, becomes a vivid neighborhood of families living close to their water source. A large, isolated mound at the end of a ceremonial causeway, containing rare, imported artifacts and evidence of ritual, transforms into a temple complex, a place of political power and spiritual gathering. This interpretive work is where the silent city finds its voice. It moves us from seeing a pattern of lines to understanding a traffic flow, from a geometric shape to a bustling marketplace, from a raised platform to a home where children played. It asks and slowly answers the human questions. Who lived here? They were farmers who terraced hillsides, engineers who calculated water flow, and artisans who shaped beautiful vessels. How did they live? They traded along wide roads, gathered in central plazas for festivals, and managed their forest with generational wisdom. The Lidar provides the grand blueprint, but it is the tiny, tangible evidence from the ground that fills the rooms with light and sound. This painstaking synthesis is what turns a technological marvel into a profound recovery of memory, allowing a society that left no written history to finally tell its story in the language of the land it shaped. The ghostly patterns on a screen need a human hand to give them meaning. Behind every digital revelation of a lost city is a person, an explorer of a new kind, driven by an old and relentless curiosity. These are the individuals who translate the promise of technology into the pages of our history books. In the dense rainforests of Belize, you will find Dr. Arlen Chase and Dr. Diane Chase, a husband and wife team who have dedicated decades to understanding the ancient Maya. For years, they painstakingly surveyed the site of Caracol on foot and from the ground, piecing together its story fragment by fragment. They were among the very first archaeologists to champion the use of Lidar in the Maya world, fighting for funding and convincing skeptical colleagues of its revolutionary potential. When the first scans over Caracol came back, they did not just see a few new temples. They saw the entire city, a vast urban landscape that confirmed their long-held suspicions about Maya population density and complexity. That moment of validation was not just a professional triumph, it was the culmination of a lifetime of perseverance. Their story is one of navigating not only physical jungle, but the bureaucratic undergrowth of academia and grant funding, all sustained by a shared passion for unlocking the past. Half a world away, in the challenging landscapes of the Brazilian Amazon, Dr. Denise Shawn embarked on a similar journey of persistence. Her work focused on the mysterious geometric earthworks, the geoglyphs, carved into the soil of the Acre state. For a long time, these features were known only to a handful of ranchers and were often dismissed as natural formations or recent creations. Dr. Shawn, through meticulous ground survey and later by securing aerial surveys, proved they were pre-Columbian and monumental in scale. She spent years building relationships with local communities, working in remote field conditions, and systematically documenting these colossal designs before deforestation could erase them forever. Her dedication gave a voice to a civilization that had been silently shaping the Amazon for centuries, fundamentally altering our perception of the entire basin. These modern explorers represent a profound shift in the tools of discovery. The iconic image of the archaeologist with a whip and a fedora is gone. Today's pioneers are just as likely to be found in a field tent with a laptop, processing gigabytes of Lidar data, or piloting a drone over an impenetrable thicket. They wield satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar alongside their trowels and brushes. Yet the core of their work remains profoundly human. It is filled with long seasons of difficult, mosquito-filled fieldwork, the frustration of broken equipment in remote locations, and the patient, often tedious labor of analysis. But it is also punctuated by those rare, breathtaking moments of triumph, the instant a dataset renders on a screen, revealing the perfect geometry of a lost plaza. The feeling of standing in a newly discovered causeway, exactly where the lasers said it would be, the first person to walk that path in 1,000 years. Sharing these personal journeys does more than add color to the science. It makes the process of discovery relatable. It reminds us that rewriting history is not an automatic function of machines, but a human endeavor fueled by curiosity, collaboration, and sheer stubborn dedication. These explorers are the vital bridge, the ones who ask the right questions of the technology and then walk into the green unknown to find the answers. Their passion is the quiet engine that turns the potential of a laser pulse into the profound revelation of a forgotten world. These silent cities are more than just archaeological curiosities. They are powerful correctives to our entire historical vision, proof that the ancient world was far more populous, connected, and ingenious than our textbooks ever allowed us to imagine. From the engineered suburbs of Angkor to the garden networks of the Amazon, Each discovery is a direct challenge to an outdated map of the human past. They dismantle the stereotype of the empty, primitive jungle and replace it with a tapestry of sophisticated societies that thrived in environments we once thought limiting. This revised history offers us profound new lessons in sustainability, complexity, and resilience, written not in stone but in soil and water. These civilizations achieved what we are still striving for, sustaining millions through a deep, collaborative partnership with their world. Their legacy is a double-edged gift, a blueprint for living in balance and a cautionary tale about the fragility of even the grandest systems. As our technology continues to peel back the layers of the forest, we stand on the brink of even greater revelations. Every new flight of a laser scanner, every new partnership with a descendant community, promises to add another chapter to this unfolding story. Let this journey inspire you to question the established narratives you have always been told. Look deeper at the green spaces on the map, for they are not voids but archives. History is not a closed book, its final pages written long ago. It is a living library, and we have only just been given the master key. The story of humanity is still being written, one laser pulse, one soil sample, one rediscovered city at a time. If you found this exploration of our hidden past fascinating, please subscribe for more journeys into the mysteries of history. We would love to hear your thoughts on these world-changing discoveries in the comments below.